Mark Rogers TV, just a few minutes after Minnesota upset Nebraska 34-23. The Gophers might be just a bit better than we anticipated this season. They're now 6-2. Nebraska probably not quite as good as we thought they were, or they're actually about as good as I thought they were. I picked them fourth in the Legends division because this Nebraska defense is not improved. It's just as bad as it's been for the last 2.5 years. Since joining the Big Ten, really, Nebraska has been woeful on defense, ripped up by Wisconsin, Ohio State, and Georgia. They're exceptional offense, as we know. So did we expect this from Minnesota? Well, maybe we should have. Starting with Wyoming in the opener, Nebraska survived that game 37-34. They couldn't stop the Cowboys. They haven't really stopped anyone this season. Nobody on their level, certainly. And Minnesota brought it on offense and scored 17 points in the first half. And again, 34 points in this game, winning 34-23. They did it with a power running game. They did it with imagination on offense. Certainly credit offensive coordinator Matt Limegrover. He was very imaginative in this game with limitations at wide receiver, at running back, at quarterback. No game changers, no dynamic players on this Minnesota offense. He generated points by using fly sweeps, by using the power running game, by using bootlegs off the fly sweep. He actually had a play at one point where the right tackle, lined up at wide receiver and called for the football, and then he threw it to the tight end down the seam for a huge gain. They ran the quarterback off to the left on a short yardage play at the goal line, and then Nelson came back under center and ran the quarterback sneak for the touchdown. They were very imaginative in this football game, but then they ran between the tackles as well with David Cobb, the junior from Texas, who was a no-show, couldn't be found on the depth chart when the season started, ran it 31 times for 138 yards in this game in replacing the starter Roderick Williams. Devon Jones also had a big game, only carried 4 times, but for 42 yards in some key and critical situations in the first half. Philip Nelson, kind of a co-starter at quarterback now with Leitner, stepped into action in the first quarter and took over the football game at the quarterback position for Minnesota. And he's nothing special. He's kind of half runner, half passer. He can do a little bit of both, but neither really, really well. 7 of 15 for 152 yards, 1 touchdown, and no interception. So he took care of the football, and he ran in key situations again against a Nebraska defense that's not as fast as people think it is. It's certainly not instinctive. It doesn't have leadership, apparently, and it's not a good Nebraska defense. It's not hard-hitting. It doesn't intimidate anyone. Philip Nelson ran it 8 times for 55 yards and 2 critical touchdowns. And he led the offense. He missed some wide-open receivers. Again, he's not an elite quarterback, but he did what he needed to do on this day. Minnesota, very impressive on offense. And what really showed that interim head coach Tracy Claeys and his team was ready to play on this day. 4th and 10, trailing by 3, around midfield, just into Huskers territory in the second quarter. They went for it, 4th and 10, and beautiful play from Nelson to Derek Engel for the touchdown on 4th and 10, a 33-yard touchdown play. It was a beautiful thing to watch. Watch the highlights. So Minnesota wins 34-23. Rashid Hageman, one of the fine defensive players in the country. If you've never seen him, never heard of him, check out the defensive stats, but more so check out the highlights because he had a sack and a tackle for loss taken away due to penalty. He's got to stay off of the face mask, but he was exceptional. He's going to be a first-round pick most likely in the NFL. But it was other Minnesota defenders who are less heralded in this game. Cedric Thompson, Aaron Hill, Damian Wilson. Minnesota was flying to the football and hitting people. Taylor Martinez only ran for 16 yards. Taylor Martinez was 16 of 30 for $139. So with Kenny Bell dropping a touchdown pass, dropping some other passes. Kenny Bell, a fine receiver, but he drops too many passes and let one go right through his hands in the end zone that Nebraska didn't capitalize on that drive in the first half. Anunwa dropped several passes as well. So Nebraska had the speed advantage, but when you don't catch the football, you can't take advantage of that on offense. Ameer Abdullah, I looked at the stats after the game, couldn't believe he had 165 yards on 18 carries because it seemed like they bottled him up. So they gave up the runs when they had Nebraska pinned back. So the big runs by Abdullah did not hurt the Minnesota defense. Again, he's 6th in the nation in rushing. Abdullah's an excellent running back, but he didn't hurt the Gophers on this day and had a key fumble as well in the first half, in which the Gophers turned around for a field goal. So Minnesota moves on to 6-2. They're 2-2 in the Big Ten after upsetting Northwestern on the road last week. Nebraska, this had to be a game that they assumed that they were going to win as a 10-point favorite. They've got games against Iowa, of course, to finish off the season, and before that, Michigan State and Michigan in its own division. So Nebraska, Bo Pelini's got to be feeling a bit of the heat after losing at home in embarrassing fashion to UCLA earlier by 20 points, blowing a 17-point lead, getting outscored 38-0 to close that one out. And now they lose at Minnesota, a team that they should and are expected to defeat. When you talk about expectations at Nebraska versus expectations at Minnesota, they don't compare. But Minnesota holding it together in absence of their head coach, Jerry Kill. So Minnesota, this is a feel-good victory for them as they defeat Nebraska for the first time in 16 tries going back to 1960. Minnesota fans, Nebraska fans, tell us what you think about your respective football programs, your respective football teams, right here on Mark Rogers TV.